Howdy there, folks. How are y'all doing? My name is Reese, and welcome back to Tekkit to the Moon, where today we shan't be going to the moon, my friends. We shan't, I say, because today we are discussing a different topic altogether. I have been teasing this since I returned to wrap this series up, and it is finally time to discuss Xenoblade Chronicles. Now, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 will be the topic of discussion here. I will not spoil the main twists in the games. I will not spoil major plot points, because I think everyone should play these games. They're both very good. We're going to be going over characters, story, motivation, mechanics, things of that nature, but not super in-depth. I just basically wanted to say, I've played all of 1 and 2, and I played most of Torna. I'm going to finish it soon. And I think you should play these games if you own a Nintendo Switch. Don't go back to the Wii or 3DS version of Xenoblade Chronicles 1. Just get the definitive edition on Switch, and you'll be set to go. 2 might be difficult to procure physically, because I don't think Nintendo made many copies, and there's definitely no new ones out there. So I had to pay the full price to buy a used copy. I didn't want to buy it digitally. I wanted to have the game, because I bought 1 physically, and I adored it, and I was like, I must have 2. 2 must also be mine. So let's go ahead and hop into it. If you're curious, I don't think either of these games are related to Xenogears or Xenosaga. I mean, like, they are in terms of certain mechanics and ideas and themes, but I don't believe the stories are in any way connected. And I think that's the same for the Wii U game Xenoblade Chronicles X. I think it's much more inspired by Xenoblade Chronicles than any other Xeno game, but I don't believe that Xenoblade Chronicles X connects to 1 and 2. But 1 and 2 do connect. And when 2 came out at the end of 2017, it was sort of the holiday title. I was going to get it because I'd bought every Nintendo game on the Switch up until that point. I played Zelda and I loved it. Played the Mario game and I loved it. And I was like, well, what's next? And it turns out what's next was Xenoblade Chronicles, and I had no idea what it was. People were very excited for 2 when the trailer came out. So I asked around. I said, do I need to play 1, 2? Well, I didn't ask around. I looked around at other people asking around. And most places oddly said no. No, 2's great, and it stands alone, and you don't have to know anything about 1 to enjoy it. And I was like, that's strange, and I was about to go in on it when suddenly someone popped in and was like, actually, they're very much connected. And while it's true, having played the games now, I can say that what this person was saying was true. You don't have to have played 1 to understand 2. It's not a direct continuation or anything of that nature. There are certain plot elements, we'll say, that are deeply, deeply connected. And while I think you can play through all of 2 and understand 2 and enjoy 2 and not notice you're missing out on anything, especially in the last couple of chapters of 2, if you've played Xenoblade Chronicles 1, you'll get a lot more out of them as you sort of see, oh, this is connective tissue. These are... Oh. And then if you go back to 1 and play Future Connected, you can be like, oh! That's the DLC expansion that comes with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. It's called Future Connected. And it does some connecting, let me tell you. But definitely play 1 before 2 if you can. That said, let's talk about 1. So 1, in terms of mechanics, that's all right. I enjoyed exploring the world. I enjoyed the combat. It's not turn-based. It's more like an MMO. It's kind of like RuneScape or the like, where you attack an enemy, and when you attack that enemy, you are auto-attacking for the most part, and it's you and 2 party members, so you have more party members that you can swap in and out of combat, so kind of like any RPG, really. But when you enter combat, whichever 3 you have selected, those are the ones you're going to combat with. And you can directly control in the world any of the characters, so they can be like your main, and you can wander around with them and explore and stuff, and you can swap between them freely, but as soon as combat begins, you're locked into the character that you were exploring with, and you have very little control over what the other 2 do. They kind of do their auto-attacks and their specials on their own. Speaking of which, you auto-attack the enemy. During that time, you build up these sort of special gauges that then let you do things like topple the enemy, or break the enemy, or block enemy's magic, things like that. It can be pretty strategic. I like it a lot more than turn-based combat. I don't like turn-based combat. I have nothing against turn-based games. me and Civ have gotten along great for years now. Love Civilization. It's all turn-based. But turn-based combat, sort of RPG turn-based combat, is not my cup of tea. I'm not saying it's bad, and I know a lot of people like it, and good for them. I wish I did, but I don't. I played through all of Dragon Quest... No, Dragon... What is it called? Dragon Quest 11S? Echoes of an Elusive Age? Is that what it is? I think that's what it's called. I liked that game. It was fun. I never really enjoyed the combat. I just did it. It was sort of like, well, this is what I have to do to enjoy, to play the game, and I just did it. And I maxed out the character, and I 100%ed everything there was to do in that game. I loved it. I wish I could remember what it was called. Is it Dragon Quest 11? Is that the name of the game? Dragon Quest 11S Echoes of an Elusive Age. Yeah, I had to Google it just to make sure, because that didn't sound like a real game. Back to Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch, launched in 2020. In terms of the overall mechanics, it's fine. Quests, they're side quests, they all kind of suck, because they're all kind of the same thing. Is this the same Enderman I've been trying to kill for basically years now? This looks like the area. I'm pretty sure it is. We're just going to leave him be. I didn't like any of the quests. I think they all kind of suck in the first game, because they're all sort of just collection quests or kill quests, right? Like, go out and find me this object. Oh, thank you. Hey, can you go out and kill X amount of bad guys? Oh, thank you. And they get old pretty quick. There's also this strange thing where in certain chapters, because the game is broken into chapters even though it's a big open world that you can go between anytime you want to. And if you progress too far, certain quests are impossible to complete after certain chapters for obvious continuity-breaking reasons. Like, if they were still available, it'd be weird. But just because it makes sense doesn't mean I like it, because I did want to 100% the game, and I didn't realize until way towards the end that, oh, I missed this quest because I'm too many chapters ahead and I can't go back to it. And that just sort of killed my desire to even bother with a lot of the quests later game, because I was like, well, I'm not going to 100% it, so why even bother? So I don't care for that, and I wish that weren't the case. And there is something similar in 2, but it's only kind of in one region and to a much lesser degree. But in terms of mechanics, the combat is perfectly fine and even fun at points. And exploration's pretty solid. And the side quests are adequate. I'll say that. How does adequate sound? They're not great, and I didn't love them, but you get by on them. And that's the most that I will say in favor of those elements of the game. Let's talk story. So, when the game starts up, it comes up and it's like, oh, one of the producers is a fellow named Tetsuya Takahashi, I think, and I'm not Japanese. I'm not super into Japanese culture or the country itself, the people. Nothing against them by any means, but what I'm trying to get at is I'm not super familiar with names. So Tetsuya might be a very popular name in Japan. I don't know. When I see Tetsuya, I only think of one person. That's Tetsuya Nomura. And he's broken my brain on many occasions in his Disney meets Final Fantasy meets whatever random idea he had that morning game series that I affectionately call Kingdom Hearts, because I forgot the name and I had to kind of just delay it there while I tried to remember it. I was like, what is it called? I affectionately call it its name. What it is what I affectionately call it. It's Kingdom Hearts. So when I saw the name Tetsuya pop up, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I sort of, in my mind, was like, I wonder if this game's going to break my brain too. Kind of, yeah. The story is insane in this game, and I loved it. It's a fantastic story, and it is, all of it, very unexpected. There's, I would say, 5 major twists in the game, and I very arrogantly thought that there are 2 of them very early on, and I won't spoil what they are. What I will say is they are related to character identities. There's a couple of characters that are mysterious, and those are the first 2 big twists, and I called both of them. And I was like, nah, there's no surprises here. And then there is a third very similar twist, where it's someone's a bad guy, and you don't know who it is. And I don't feel like that's a spoiler to say. I won't say who. But when that's revealed, I was like, oh ho! Alright, well that's not what I expected. And then there's a massive twist concerning the history of the world you're in the game. So it's not a spoiler, I think, to say that the game takes place on two massive Gundam Titan robot creatures. And I say that's not a spoiler because that's literally how the game starts. The game opens with these two creatures fighting one another, and then they die, and the game sort of explains, and after their death, life sprang into existence on the two Titans. And that's sort of where you pick up, is many, many thousands of years later, living on one of the Titans. You're playing as a character called Shulk. And the big twist number 4, one of the bigger ones, is relating to the history of the conflict between these two massive Titans. And I will confess, genuinely, I was surprised. I was like, oh, that is a twist I didn't see coming. But then a sense of dread overcame me as I played through the game. And I just began to feel like there's more. There's more that this game isn't telling me. There's another twist, and I don't know what it is. And I tried to figure it out. And I looked at all the clues, all the evidence. It's there, in a way. It's not impossible for you to figure out. It's not like it's some late game twist that you could have never seen coming. But certainly, when it happened for me, I was like, oh, twist number 5. So when twist number 5 happens, it definitely blew my mind. It was unexpected. And it was a great twist, and I loved it. So what I will say is the story is... it's more than you think it is. It's more than meets the eye. It sort of starts off very basic as like a revenge. Like, I will have my vengeance as a Shulk. And it definitely sort of evolves. And what's cool is that the real story is happening throughout the entire game. And you're only realizing what bigger role you play as it continues. I don't really want to go into too many details because I think that if you're going to play it, I sort of want you to experience it in its entirety without sort of any spoilers from me. So I'm going to leave it there and say that I quite enjoyed the story, quite enjoyed the twists, and I think that there's something to the name Tetsuya that makes you, I think it's bestowed upon children in Japan, not from birth, but from an age where their parents are like, your imagination's too big. You're going to get yourself into trouble there, Tetsuya, with this crazy idea of yours. Now, that's story. Characters is a different issue. So I have, after finishing Xenoblade Chronicles 1, I've done some, reading up on things, because there was a couple of questions I still had at the end. The game does a good job of sort of explaining things, but I wanted to go for a deeper dive. And I've had to be careful, because a lot of people will bring Xenoblade Chronicles 2 into their discussions, and, at the time I started really looking into 1 and its stories and its twists. I hadn't finished 2 yet, but it very quickly became apparent to me, like, the two female characters in this game, well, Charla is in the game, no one cares about her, but Melia and Fiora are beloved by people. These are a couple of waifu characters that I think there are people in this world who would die for them. Which is crazy, because I didn't find either of them or any of the other characters all that interesting. Shulk is a bit boring. His friend Ryan is a bit boring. Dunban is a bit boring. Fiora and Melia are a bit boring. I don't really care about any of them. None of them endeared themselves to me. I don't care if they live or die. It's funny, because I like the story in terms of the events taking place around these characters. But as for how it affects these characters and their lives and their reactions to it, I just didn't care for. Like, I almost wished I was just playing as myself, because then I wouldn't have to deal with these people. I don't dislike any of them. I just don't care about them. I feel like I'm putting out the wrong vibes. Just to reiterate, I don't hate the characters. I just didn't feel particularly invested in them. That's all. And I think the characters in 2 are better, which is something else strange that I picked up, but we'll get to that here in a second. So, we talked about the world is... it's an interesting world, it's an interesting story, and the mechanics are great. I really enjoyed my time playing 1, and I think that it has some pretty good twists and turns in it that I certainly didn't see coming in a lot of instances, and... I would recommend playing the games. I think that's a good place to leave it out on, just to say that, hey, give them a shot. You might like them. Play them on the Switch. Oh, you know what? One other thing I should note. Let's do a brief comparison. Or maybe we'll save comparisons till the end. Let's move on to 2. So 2 came out in 2017 on the Nintendo Switch. And I like it so much better. So in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, I guess we'll do our comparisons here as we talk about 2. The world is set on the bodies of 2 Titan Gundam creatures, right? Which is an interesting idea, and it does have some interesting payoff. In Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I don't think this is a spoiler because it's sort of the setup for the world. The game is set on... How do you even begin to describe this? A world of clouds. It's a cloud sea, they call it. So think of just like an endless ocean of clouds, and inside of the cloud sea, there are these giant titans that are sort of like sea creatures, but they fly around through the cloud sea. So you have a giant whale and like a leviathan and all these different massive sea creatures. And humans live on the backs of these things, as well as Nopon. There's Nopon in both. Heropon Ricky is annoying in the first game. Tora in the second game, not quite as bad. But so you have this very interesting world where it's wherever you look out at, there's like this endless sea of clouds that looks really nice. It's like this real majestic, and it gives a large sense of scale to the world where you look out, it's just endless cloud sea in every direction. I like it a lot. I think the world's very interesting looking. Mechanics-wise, very similar to the first game, but I think combat's a little bit more dynamic. There's a bit more going on. I remember listening to a podcast when 2 came out where they were discussing, and they were complaining like, man, I'm 10 hours into this game and it's still giving me tutorials. And at the time I listened to that, I was like, ugh, I don't like that. That sounds annoying. But at the same time, having played the game, I understand why. It's because the game's always introducing new stuff, and I thought that would get annoying, but it really doesn't. It keeps the combat feeling more dynamic and more rewarding. I hate quick-time events. There are sort of quick-time events during combat, but you know when they're going to happen, you know what the presses are, and they're not difficult to master, and so that sort of extra edge in the middle of a fight of being like, all right, here we go. I'm going to pop this special, and I've chained all these together. We're about to do some big damage. It definitely made combat feel more dynamic. So combat in 2 is better. I think the world is better in 2. I think the story is more interesting. So there are twists and turns in this story. I don't think the biggest twist in 2 is, and this is why I say you need to play 1 before 2, it's sort of the same twist as 1. But in relation to the world of 2 and how they're connected, because they are connected. It's not just thematically. They are very much linked together in a very big and meaningful way, and I can't believe anyone on any forum would ever recommend anyone play 2 without 1 as though it's somehow even an option, because they are very much connected. And it's the sort of thing where you could play 1... or you can play 2 having not played 1, and you can enjoy 2, but you get so much out of the last couple of chapters of 2 if you are familiar with the twists of 1, and that's all I'll say on that. But I think the story is more interesting. The story that you follow with the character of Rex and his quest to help get this character called Pyra to Elysium. I really don't want to talk too much about it, because I just think it's a good quest, and I like all the characters more. Rex is a more interesting character. Gramps is a more interesting character. Nia is a more interesting character. You want to talk waifu material? This game has got Pyra, it's got Mithra, it's got Numa. This game's got waifus out the wazoo. And they're all way more interesting than boring old Melia and Fiora. Which, I mean, if that's your cup of tea, so be it. But if you're looking for waifus, I feel like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 wins. Unless you're into girls with wings on their head. In which case, you know what? I get it. Go get that Melia feather, I guess. So I guess in the interest of comparison, I like 2 more, which I think is a little bit outside the norm. I generally don't care about what a majority of people think or care about. I sort of hate that when you are talking to someone and it's like, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, most people. I'm like, I did not ask. I asked what you thought about it. Most people hate the Star Wars prequels. I love them. I can acknowledge they're bad, but I love them. I love Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I can't acknowledge it's bad because I don't think it is, and I can't understand why the majority of people like one better. It was very strange to be kind of looking into this and being like, what? A lot of people think one has a better story, that one has a more interesting world, that one has better characters, and even saying it now, I'm flabbergasted because I disagree on all of those fronts. I think the world of 2 is better, and not just because it came out more recently. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 came out on the Wii originally, and then on the 3DS. It's an older game, but even the remastered definitive edition that came out in 2020, which upgrades the art style to match Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I don't know if maybe that's what the devs wanted one to look like originally, and they couldn't quite manage it, because it looks pretty gnarly on the Wii. I've gone back and I've looked at some comparison videos. It looks very similar in art style, and it's a great-looking game. Still, I think the level design is less dynamic. It's less interesting. It's less fun to explore. I had fun exploring in 2, and 1... it just feels like a chore because none of it's particularly interesting to look at or to run around. And I think the concept for the world in 2 is more interesting and possibly better, at least in my own humble opinion, subjective opinion. I think that objectively, both are interesting. I don't think... have you ever played a game where you play on a giant Gundam in the middle of an endless ocean? No, I didn't think so. So it's a pretty original one. But riding on the backs of flying sea creatures in a cloud ocean is such a unique idea that I think it speaks to me more than Xenoblade 1. I can't say that it's better or worse, but Xenoblade Chronicles 1, I don't find the world as interesting to explore or to look at, or even in concept. I don't think it's as interesting in concept or execution. I think 2 is more interesting in concept and in execution. I think I like it more. I actually like the characters. I don't dislike the characters in 1, but I love the characters in 2. I like the story. I don't think it's as mind-melting in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because I feel like if you played 1 and you go into 2, there are certain elements that carry over that you can kind of look at from the very get-go and be like, okay, I see the connective tissue, so I kind of already know the twist from 1, and I can assume it's the same in 2. But there's still twists and turns in the story that I didn't see coming. The motivation for why Pyra wants to go to Elysium. I'm not going to say what Elysium is. I'm not even going to say what her motivation to get there is. What I will say is her motivation, there's a twist involved with that. It's not what you think it is. And... who Mithra is. I can say the name Mithra. I can say the name Numa. If you've never played the games, those don't mean anything to you. But when you find out about them, you're going to be like, huh. Okay. You know, there's great twists. I don't feel like they're quite as big as 1's, but I cared more about them because I actually cared about the people these twists were happening to, as opposed to 1 where I just could not have in any way cared any less at all. I did not hate those characters, I just didn't care about them. So, the mechanics are better. I think the game is more fun to play, it's more fun to explore. The side quests are actually good. There's good stories connected to them, and even the ones that do come down to like, oh, can you go kill this thing, or can you go fetch this thing? They're just done in a way that makes them more interesting and more sort of dynamic. They're less cut, copy, paste. In 1, they're very cut, copy, paste, right? Like, it definitely feels like, oh, you had this quest built for the last region, and then you put it in that region 3 times, and now you've put it 3 times in every region, you know? There are quests in the first game that are literally just like monster hunting quests, right? Like, you get to a new region, and there's some guy who will give you a series of 3, 4, 5 quests that are all like, go kill 5 of these, go kill 10 of these, go kill 3 of these. And it's the same thing in every region, and I cannot understand why it's the case that they've done this, but they have. So for me, 1 delivers on almost every front, or I'm sorry, 2 delivers on almost every front. It supersedes 1, except for on 1 level. And here's the thing. It might not have been the case in the original. I'd never played the Wii version, never played the 3DS version, but on the Switch version, the definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 that came out this year has better presentation in the menus and in the map. And that might come down to it being, in a sense, newer, right? Because the original Xenoblade came out in, I don't know, whatever year on the Wii. But the definitive edition came out this year in 2020 and is therefore newer by 3 years than Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So I think the menus are probably different in this game compared to how they were originally presented. They're just cleaner. The menus in the definitive edition are cleaner. They're easier to navigate. The map is much more useful. It's much better than in 2. 2, even though it's newer than 1, it is older than 1's definitive HD remake, and I think they must have done some work because it feels like a very modern game. The maps and the menus in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 Definitive Edition feel more modern than the actual newer game, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, that came out in 2017. 2, the menus are clunky. It's hard to figure out what I'm doing, what I'm controlling, and also the map is useless in a way that is frustrating. There were moments in playing 2 where I was genuinely just frustrated with the map because it wasn't being useful in the way that I thought it should be. Like, how come I can't move it around and zoom in on points? Why is it like this? Eventually, by the end of the game, I'd worked it out a little bit more. But I'll give 1 that, at least in the definitive edition, the presentation of things like maps and menus are better. It feels modern, it feels cleaner, and it's easier to sort of understand and digest. Part of that might be because there's more systems in 2 to keep track of. That's a true thing. There are far more systems. That might contribute to it to some degree, but that's really the only... And I guess the wow moment was bigger. Like, the big twist number 5 was bigger in 1 than in 2. But I spent over 100 hours in both of these games. And I think I had more fun with every hour in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 than I did with every hour in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. But that's not to say 1 is bad, right? Like, I don't want to rag on 1 and make it sound like it's not a good game or an enjoyable game or like you shouldn't play it. They're both very good. It's just 2 happens to be a very gooder compared to 1. And that's not good grammar, but you see what I'm trying to get at there. You know, if I had to choose, you know, which one is definitively the best, and I can't really say objectively. I mean, the menus are objectively better, but I think on a subjective level, I would definitely say that, 1 is the better game. No, that's a Freudian slip. I can definitely say definitively 2 is the better game. Personally. Subjectively. I have no clue where I am right now. I've got no idea whatsoever. I thought I was tracing a path around the outskirts of the world, but now I am not so sure. I feel like I should have curved back around. Well, I think home base is closer to like negative like 0 and 200 maybe. We'll keep going this way and we'll hope for the best. That seems like an idea. Also, another thing with 1 is it's more customizable. That's another thing I'll give 1. You can dress everyone up in nice little costumes, and you can equip gear to your characters in 1, but you can have them have the exterior appearance of other gear. So if you find an outfit you really like, you can equip better armor, but then configure it to where that outfit is what sort of shows when you're running around the world. And there's Ekru type, so if you want to make your waifu naked the whole game, you can basically do that. It puts them in what is supposed to be, I think, swimwear. Like on the guy, it's very clearly like swim trunks. So if you want to run around with Shulk and Ryan and Dunban and some swim trunks, you can do that. But on the girls, it puts them in bikinis that are basically like, it's a bra and panties. Like don't even joke around. They're naked, which was very strange to me, because I was like, I mean, it is still a Nintendo game. 2 changes that. You know, if you want to be a weird little pervert, you know, waifu loving. I want to be careful what I say here. If that's what you're into, then one will let you do that. Two, I think with the DLC, I never did it, but you can eventually unlock costumes of that nature for the female characters. But for the most part, I think they've already got enough on display, and can't imagine you really needing more than that. Waifu stuff aside, though, and honestly just being perfectly flat and subjective, is that my wall? Really, I made it back already. I do think that 2 is just a better game. I enjoyed 2 better. And you don't have to agree with me. Not expecting you to. I'm just suggesting that you try the games. The whole purpose of all of this was to put out there that both games are very good. Both games are very fun. I'm almost done with Torna. I might play X, even though it's not really story related to the other 2. I might play it anyway. I wish it wasn't on the Wii U, but what can you do? I know that they are working on a game right now over at, is it Obelisk? Monument? The Pillar of Autumn? What are they called? Who makes these games? Monolith Soft. That's it. Yeah, that's the developers. They're in the middle of a game. Not sure what it is, though. There's speculation that it could be either a remaster of Chronicles X, which... cool, I guess. I can just play it on the Wii U. I don't care. Or I could load it in Cemu if I wanted to. I guess it'd be nice to have it on the Switch, but I don't really want them to invest time in that when they could invest time in something like a Xenoblade Chronicles 3. But also, there's rumors that they've thrown themselves wholeheartedly into Breath of the Wild 2 because they played a big part in Breath of the Wild 1. They worked with Nintendo a lot on the open world design, and having played through 1 and 2, I can kind of see that, but apparently Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U is the game where if you play that and then you play Breath of the Wild, you can sort of see the direct comparisons between the two. So I would probably like to get into that. I don't want to believe that the entire studio is wholly and completely consumed with working on Breath of the Wild 2. I'd like to think they've got a division out there working on the third game, because I feel like the release order of these things is Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torn of the Golden Country, which is the big DLC expansion to 2, and then Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition launched with a new DLC built in called Future Connected, which I feel, having played it, connects a lot to 2 and hints at things in the future that might even draw the 2 together even more. So I'd like to see a 3 and see where that goes. Especially with how 2 ended. I'd be very interested in continuing on with those character stories. I'd like to see a 3. But, oh no, what if they make X2? I've got to play X first. Don't do that! If you're going to make a Xenoblade Chronicles X2, make X1 remastered first, please. So I don't have to wait 3 years after X2 was released for the X1 remastered and catch up and play them both back to back. That'd be nuts. But, yeah, I don't know. Also, maybe, you know how thick Zelda is in Breath of the Wild 2? Remember the frog scene? I think that Monolith Soft might have had something to say in that as well, having played 2 now. And seeing their choice in camera angles and outfits and things. Just throwing that out there. But I enjoyed both of the games, and now I'm going to go. Thank you folks for watching. God bless you, and I'll see you later. Bye!